All right, we are live, everyone. Welcome back to the Presbyterian Outlooks page. We are here for another Facebook Live conversation, and today I'm really pumped because we are talking to the Reverend Dr. Chris Burton. Chris is a writer, he is a podcaster, he is the creator and sole proprietor of DeBatis Chaplain Consulting, which centers around anti-racism and anti-racist practices. He is also the director of the Leadership Institute at Union Presbyterian Seminary. His resume can and does go on, and we could spend the rest of our time just offering accolades to you, Chris, but I really want us to dive in to the topic at hand. But first, I just want to say thank you for coming, and welcome for being here and for being part of the Outlook family. But if you're good, I want to jump in with you and get into this if you're cool with that.
I'm here for it. And thank you, Jesse. And thank you to everyone at Presbyterian Outlook. It's really good to be with you.
Awesome. So for those who are logging in and who are listening, we are here to talk about the upcoming podcast that will launch next week, next Wednesday, November 5th, on both Apple Music and Spotify. And it is called The Theology of Hip-Hop. And this is a kind of joint-ish endeavor between Chris and the Presbyterian Outlook. And so, you know, when you think Presbyterian Outlook, the first thought you have is not necessarily hip-hop. No. I guess my first question for you, Chris, is where did the idea of this podcast come from? And then also, how did you discern that the Pres Outlook was where you wanted to partner with?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. For me, one of the things I love most about hip hop, sometimes for casual listeners of people outside of the culture, they don't understand that hip hop is not just the music. It's a culture. It's a whole way of moving through the world. And so for me, the part of hip hop that's always grabbed me is emceeing. And a part of emceeing that really holds me, it's not the only thing, but a part of emceeing that really holds me is lyricism. Mm-hmm. And I've never just been intrigued by the production. The production, I could get into the musicality and talk about all the different producers over the years who have grabbed my ears and whose brilliance production-wise have grabbed me. But I've often, if I'm really leaning into what makes me appreciate the music the most, it's the lyricism. People saying something with substance. And some of my favorite lyricists haven't just done what Chuck D talked about, which is where hip hop is the CNN of the ghetto or Black CNN, however the exact quote goes. It was much more about finding those moments where, yes, you're talking about what's happening in the world, and you're also connecting it to something transcendent, right? Something that makes me say, yes, these are the conditions, this is what's going on, but also there's something so much more to this, right? And just these profound moments I heard throughout the years. And so I've been listening to rap for most of my life at this juncture. And I always, because of, my own God consciousness, my own faith life, have always thought about how it resonates and how I can hear, KRS quoting scripture and even rappers like Mos Def talking about it, Nas talking about it, rappers of that nature, Kendrick Lamar in more recent years. It's always had me intrigued the ways in which these MCs thought about God and thought about their own relationship with God, and the faith they practice or didn't practice, or a faith that their grandmothers influenced them with. And so by the time I got to this point of approaching Presbyterian Outlook, what intrigued me about working with Presbyterian Outlook was the whole notion of part of my work with DeBatis Consulting, which I've now added coaching to it. So it's really DeBatis coaching and consulting. It's really, how do you bring together people who otherwise may not have a chance to talk with one another? I've been doing the hip hop education work where I've, learned at the feet of, like geniuses like Christopher Edmond. He had back on Twitter close to a decade ago, this Tuesday night tweets where educators who are using hip hop pedagogy would come together and learn from one another. I've gone to the conference that he hosted up at Teachers College. And so I've been in those spaces where brilliant people are talking about hip hop from a pedagogical lens, right, as an educator. And I've dabbled in folks who are talking about from a theological space, like getting a chance to read geniuses like Imani Perry and so on. But I felt like with Presbyterian Outlook, we're now having a space to be able to engage those who take theology seriously and infusing it with this hip hop lens that may, to your point, Jesse, be unfamiliar to some of those in the audience, but also may be refreshing to others. You may have folks who have listened to rap throughout their life, or maybe their kids listen to it, their grandkids listen to it, and now they're like, "Oh, I loved that Big Daddy Kane song, but I didn't realize he was talking about that." Or I love this new Clips album, but I didn't realize they were talking about all that. And so it allows people to come together who otherwise may not have the chance to come together. So it's really an effort in my overall vocational effort to bring folks together and be neighbors who otherwise may not have the chance to.
Yeah. So I want to dive in a little bit into that a little bit more, because I want to sort of talk about further, like the theology, the intersection of theology and hip hop, because in so many ways, hip hop asks and allows for intimacy with God in a way that even the church shies away from, in my experience. And so and it talks, you said it yourself, like it speaks to our circumstances, but it speaks to something more than that as well.
Mm-hmm.
It also observes, it comments, it names, and it questions, and it asks where God is in everything.
Right.
And so often genres like hip hop, but also genres like punk and genres like rock and so on and so forth, these genres which speak to the human condition, which speak to where we are and systemic injustice, and we'll name it white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
These genres are demonized by the church.
Of course.
And so, but the intimacy and the depth and the language and the lyricism that you talked about, those lyrics, the language, the observations, that's holy language. It's sacred language. And so can you talk about a little bit seeing the sacred and seeing theology in what has traditionally been considered sort of like secular?
Yeah.
And why do you think people are so resistant to hear God speaking through these artists?
Well, I think number one, I'll say that I take the omnipresence of God very seriously.
Yeah.
And so, when the psalmist says, "If I made my bed in hell, you're still there," our MCs prove it. Our punk rockers prove it. The great Bob Marley talked about rebel music, right? And how, as a reggae artist, he could interface with Keith Richards and Rolling Stones, or see how like the Clash could vibe with him when he visits London, because they're all speaking about the parts that polite society, which church especially is a part of, wants to shy away from. And so I know, and you hear it even on Theology of Hip-Hop, that first episode, you're gonna get a chance to hear my mom and I talk about how much I wanted to get that copy of Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood, DMX's second album. And she, being a good Christian woman, was like, "No, this man is covered in blood on this album. No, you're not getting, this looks demonic." So there was no chance 12, 13-year-old me was getting that album. But I think about it, and as you were saying to Jesse, I was like, of course the church has shied away from it. When you learn about the history of blues music playing what was often called the devil's chord, right? And just all these different ways that music was just viewed as like, all of the mythology in terms of saying like, oh, Lucifer is in charge of music and you're using that music to praise the devil and not praise God. But I've seen the ways in which, localizing it just to hip hop for a second, I've seen the ways in which rap music has allowed people to ask deep questions about the state and condition of their soul, right? Like, does God care about me if he lets all these things happen, right? And just being able to articulate a lament practice that resonates with the Psalms, that resonates with Lamentations, that resonates with something you see in Job. Yeah, there's some cussing sometimes, right? It really depends on the artist, But I think people have let the cussing and the profanity blind their eyes and numb their ears to the reality that they're speaking to and the prophetic in the midst of the profane. And so I'm not afraid, I'm not shy about getting into the mix with it and really helping to contextualize things so that people who are in the church, even if they don't walk away from this saying, oh, I need to go listen to Mobb Deep's new album, I still want them able to understand the importance and I would say the mission critical nature of looking toward the margins if you describe yourself as a follower of Christ.
Yeah.
And if you're going to look at the margins, you're going to look at the ghetto, you're going to look at the parts that society has systemically and intentionally avoided, you're going to see some ugly things. Some things are going to make you uncomfortable. But how are you going to have that imminence that Christ calls us to have if you're not willing to get into the midst with it?
Yeah. I think as you're speaking, one of the things that I'm recalling is you say, and you all will hear this when it comes out, in the DMX episode, you speak to DMX's struggle and his lack of resources and how that made it easier for him to take a darker, like to go that darker path.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you also talk about what is more frightening. I think this is what you say. What is more frightening? The people and how they react to subhuman conditions or the subhuman conditions themselves. And I feel like that's what you're getting at here, is this sort of like, are we so caught up in like the curse words and all of this stuff that we are not able to actually hear the profound truth of what people are saying? And I think I so loved the episodes that I get to hear them before you all get to hear them. But the episodes that I've gotten to hear so far and be witness to, like, it gives me, and I've told you this myself, like it gives me a new appreciation for the music that I was able to listen to as a younger person, and then now hear them again with adult ears and with a new lens. And I also sorry, I'm losing my train of thought because I'm like caught up in everything. But you're speaking so profoundly to what hip hop does. And in so many ways, hip hop has always told the story of what is happening from a lens or from a perspective that is most often silenced, from people who are silenced or who are marginalized or pushed to the side. And we know from scripture that that's where Christ went, to those people, to hear those voices, to tell those stories. And I think with hip hop, hearing those voices and bringing that, like breaking that silence, it broadens the conversation, it creates conversation. We saw this happen this past winter with Kendrick Lamar in the halftime show.
Sure.
See it happening now with Bad Bunny, and on a variety of levels about language, and that's multifaceted.
Absolutely.
So do you think, because a lot of the artists that you talk about in the podcast, Tupac, DMX, Lauryn Hill, they are 90s, early 2000s artists. Do you think that the hip hop artists of today, hip hop music today, is still speaking to this moment? If yes, how? If not, how? Are we still being met with the prophetic nature of hip hop the way that we were in like the 80s and 90s?
Oh, that's a lovely question. I would tell you one of the main shifts I've seen, and as someone who loves the culture and feels an indebtedness and a responsibility to the culture, I would tell you the main shift that I have noticed is that you go from 90s and 2000s, warts and all, it's aspirational music, right? Like it can be, I'm aspiring to sell the most drugs in this community. It could be, I'm aspiring to just prove how much wealthier I am than you, for like, you know, all the criticisms that we can have of that. But it was still, the focus was mostly on improving my situation. You may not like the way I want to go about improving my situation, but I'm focusing on improving my situation. The switch that I've seen is that the music in the late 2010s into now like halfway through the 2020s has increased in its nihilism.
Okay.
Nihilism has always been present because you're still being truthful and honest about it, right? Like if you listen to an artist like Scarface from Houston, Texas, there's some deep nihilism in that music, right? Things are very, very difficult in what he's describing. But what I've seen increase is that instead of lifting you up, the music often pulls you down.
Okay.
And so I think that's reflective. I don't use that to criticize, Gen Z voices or younger millennial voices in the culture. I use it to say, as those who are older, as like older millennial, we got to pay attention to what's going on with the kids, man. I don't know if they're all right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's not really me being like changing the music. What's all that noise? I'm not doing any of that. I'm just like, I know that music reflects the temperature, and these music, the artists that are reflecting. When I go into like local jails and prisons, and I ask the kids what they listen to, and they talk about artists like Rod Wave, they talk about artists like NBA YoungBoy. I'm not knocking it. I'm saying I know the content of those artists, and I'm like, are y'all good? Like, what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And so just want to make sure that they're okay. And I think that has been the shift. So to answer your question, Jesse, it's not so much that they're not, the artists have somehow, because people have always had this criticism within hip hop, is just a sense of like, oh, did someone sell out? Are people not talking about, like, they're not keeping it real? They're not talking about what's really going on in this culture, in the streets. It's not that. I think that it's actually taking a turn. And as I see in the comments, someone's asking about nihilism. Like, to me, the best way to describe nihilism is if you remember that moment in Queen Bohemian Rhapsody where you hear Freddie Mercury say nothing really matters.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the best way to, from my vantage point, to understand nihilism, is this sense of, if it happens, it happens. Like, yeah, the asteroid's coming, I'm fine with it because at least I get some rest now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of posture happening. So I don't see the fire, if you want to contrast it with, like, you listen to like the late 80s, the Public Enemies, the X-Clans, the NWAs, these artists, Brand Nubians, who are just kind of like Queen Latifah, speaking with a real righteous conviction about what's going on. I don't see that as often, though it still exists. I still see groups like, I think about the kids, Coast Contra, who are talking about things that are happening in their areas. Jid, who just put out a fantastic album earlier this summer called God Does Like Ugly, is absolutely talking about what's happening in Atlanta. So you still see it in pockets, but I'm saying that the overall temperature of the genre with younger artists, you have a renaissance of older artists who've put out a lot of music through Mass Appeal and everything that Nas is doing this summer. But you have the younger artists, in my estimation, are still in a very low place. They're not quite in an excited place. I want them to make, my prayer for them is that they get to make happier music, for real.
Yeah. Shawnee McElwain is saying that she chaperoned a Rod Wave concert and had to ask her if her kids were okay.
Straight up, right? Like, y'all good, man? We get some ice cream after this concert. I promise you, man. We'll see some sunshine, because it's really it weighs on the soul if you're paying attention to the music. Like, he's a talented artist, but it weighs on the soul, and it just makes me say that he is tapping into a generational feeling, right? And that's important. In the same way that like grunge music was doing that for folks who were listening to that in the 90s, I think he's tapping into a reinterpretation of the blues in this time.
Yeah. Does that speak to, and maybe this is getting off topic, but maybe not. I think in some ways we still live in a culture where we do have to pretend everything's all right, that therapy and mental health is still taboo. And now we have these artists that are openly speaking to young people, that are naming these things and these feelings that are taking them to this place of that soul work. And again, I don't know how you can look at that and say that's not God at work. That's not holy work of let me speak to what is going on deep inside of you so that you can have these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I have a question in that, but I appreciate that we are sort of continuing the trend, even though it does feel a little nihilistic, of being able to name sort of some of these deeper emotions that historically have been considered taboo, and we don't talk about them. We don't talk about our feelings. We don't talk about our mental health. We don't talk about this or that. I mean, I can't remember who it is, but I mean, his one song was the Suicide Hotline.
Was that not Macklemore? Who's that?
No, it wasn't Macklemore.
Oh, my man, Logic.
Yeah, Logic. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we this Gen Z generation has definitely shifted, and we're just gonna name how we feel.
Yeah, totally. Totally. We don't need the people please. We're just gonna say it exactly the way it is. And I'm with that to an extent. I think my hope is that we can hold up a mirror and hand you a way out. Hand you a key. Right? Because it's not necessarily like, if you think about it in like a support group sense, if we're all talking about this common problem we have, yes, it's wonderful to have a space where we can finally articulate that, yes, this is a problem. But at the same time, at some point, we got to figure out, all right, so how are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to learn to deal with this? And I fear that it's just becoming another form of an echo chamber that we have. Echo chamber aplenty in our society and in this culture, but providing people a way of understanding how to deal with it, right? So I can be in a group where I'm talking about my problem. Show me how to solve this thing, so it's not the only way that's gonna, the only way I can move through the world is by like being burdened by the situation. Give me a way out of it,
Yeah. Well, I think that takes us back to theology and to scripture. Of so often people come to the church looking for answers. They look, I love the way you said, let's hold up a mirror, but then also offer a way out. And I think so often we have a history and a propensity to say, okay, come to the church and find Jesus and we'll solve all your problems. But really it's, so often it has been, come to the church, find Jesus, and we're going to add you to our membership rolls, and yay for us. And then that process of really doing the soul searching work, that true life work, and that study of what it means to come out on the other side, that part is missing. And so I love the way that you named the parallels in that, without even maybe necessarily realizing you were naming the parallels, but I think that also speaks to, next month, November, our Presbyterian Outlook issue is modern day prophets, modern day music prophets. And so you are writing for that issue, I believe. And so I guess, Chris, do you believe that there are modern day prophets? And if there are, who should we be listening to, especially in this genre?
Yeah, I absolutely do believe that, particularly in this genre, I do believe in general that there are modern day prophets, and I'm inspired by the way in which God, through the Holy Spirit, continues to just speak through people. It can be something as simple as a child, a precocious child being like, "This is not okay," and letting it be said. Because I think something that's really key to remember about prophetic work is that it's the art of simply telling the truth, right? So people get so caught up and think you have to have like a giant beard or something to be a prophet, but you really just have to be someone committed to telling the truth. And I think in a world where the truth is getting more and more inconvenient, the need for prophetic voices is only going to increase. And so as I think about artists within this genre who I think are prophetic voices, I believe that, I've covered some of them on this show, but I really appreciate the ways in which Kendrick Lamar of Grand Notorieties is doing that work. I think about there was a song that came out a couple of years ago. It's called like Waukesha, where this brother, I think it was a young boy, who was talking about the addiction he had to lean, like a drink that has actually cost the lives of several rappers and just young people in general. And so I just see people being able to like fiercely tell the truth about what's going on with them and how they see it. And sometimes it's in very, very like unorthodox ways when looked at through the lens of the church, but I think it's a message that's still important and profound, right? Like you can see someone like Cardi B and be just kind of like turned off, like, oh, she's so loud and she's doing all this. But frankly, even just listening to her last album, she's talking about the heartbreak and pain of going through divorce and just trying to figure out what does it mean to have thought that I love this person, was going to spend the rest of my life with this person, and now that's not true. Where do I go from there? Just profound articulations of reality, and I see that happening all throughout. So I think that hip hop in 2025 is in a very beautiful place. I think it's the most intergenerational the genre has ever been. I think about, there was a time when 30 seemed like a retirement age for rappers,
Yeah.
right? But now we're seeing artists who are into their 50s, if not touching 60, releasing albums that are worth listening to, and that the way that we're consuming music in general, it's not something where only one of us are going to have to shine. It's so stratified that everyone's able to tap in with a particular audience at this moment. So I'm really excited about where it is and where it's going to continue to go.
Yeah. This is probably not so much about the podcast, and maybe we haven't been talking about the podcast. We will get there. We'll get there, I promise. But I like being able to talk to you about this. And so you talked about lyricism, you talked about in a generation, you talked about the prophetic voice. I guess what I'm curious about, Chris, liturgy within the church, liturgy is the work of the people.
Yeah.
And so often liturgy, I know Larissa Kwanga-Bezia has said this before. She's named that, when we use liturgy and we say we, she doesn't feel represented in that we.
Come on.
And so how can we allow the very prophetic nature that is hip hop, the lyricism, the holy work that is coming through these messages, that is being inspired by God through these messages, whether people realize it or not? How can we allow hip hop to inform the way that we do the work of the people, the way that we do Christian education, the way that we bring together this intergenerational way of doing church, and not in a way that's performative, not in a way that's gimmicky, but that we actually hear God speaking through this and say, okay, let this divine spirit keep blowing through us in a way that speaks here as well. How can we expand our work, our liturgical work, in a way that draws from hip hop, that is inspired by hip hop?
I think in two ways. Two of the gifts that I think hip hop has given the world that can really be helpful for liturgy and liturgical practices are sampling and the remix.
Okay.
So, for example, I love jazz because hip hop taught me jazz.
Okay.
Like, I would not know artists like Ahmad Jamal if I wasn't listening to jazz, to hip hop first.
Right.
And so when you get into like the nerdy side of like, digging in the crates and trying to figure out, who do they sample on this song?
Right.
You find the original artist, and then because you love music at this point, you're just loving and discovering, Swahili Land or I Love Music for the first time. These songs are 60 plus years old, and you're discovering for the first time, and you just falling in love with like Bob James Nautilus or something like that. Take Me to Mardi Gras. And so sampling in that same way, we can take things that the church has done, the church in the West, the church in the United States, the church in Presbyterian culture has done for generations, and take parts of it to build this new thing that God is pressing us into. Mm-hmm. And in that same vein, it connects to the second tool, which is the art of the remix, right? Where, hip hop artists will take one song and then it really blows up. It becomes a really popular song. And so they add more voices to it, mm-hmm. right? So, you have an example of a song called One Blood by The Game that came out in like 2005. There was like, and people laugh about it, was like 100 people on that remix. Like, he put out a remix of just, I don't know if the song is 25 minutes long. He just put so many people on the song because it was such a big record that people wanted to keep joining into it. And think about the hospitality in that. Think about the invitational nature of that. So when, someone like, Larissa, who's brilliant, says, I don't feel my voice included, how do we remix the
Mhm.
liturgy in a way that allows those voices to be added to it? How do we sample the old records from before, right? Like we look at, our hymnals and some of these songs older than the country, right? Like how do we take
Yeah.
those songs and bring them in?
Yeah.
So what's going on right now in this moment? Not throwing out, because I think in previous iterations, people have just been so happy to throw out traditional services. I'm saying there's a way that we remix it and you sample from it so that God is able to still use what was happening and what blessed generations previously in a new time. And people from a new time can learn and say, like, the elders had something going right. The elders had something that was useful. So we don't have to just start from square one in every single generation, but we continue to build on it through the power of the Holy Spirit, moving through us and building us into generationally.
Yeah. That's so cool. I'm sorry.
Good.
No, I'm just the way that we have sort of co-opted liturgy to be the work of the people, and we've boiled it down to whoever is creating the bulletin. That we
Yeah. Straight up.
and
Right.
instead,
Right.
like we're called to do more and be
That's
more
real.
and have more collective voices.
So real.
Sorry, I just got like both excited and frustrated at the same time.
That's real. That's passion. That's passion.
So Chris, before we finish, tell us what we can expect from this podcast. Who are you going to talk about? What does the
Yeah.
format look like? How many episodes are we going to get out of this?
Cool.
We get samples from your mom, which is really great.
Yeah.
I love the little talk to us talk us through what we should expect.
Yeah, so 10 episodes looking at artists throughout mostly like the 90s and 2000s, but many of these artists are still recording, right? So probably I want to say just offhand, probably Kendrick Lamar's the most recent artist in the mix, but that's not to say, if you're someone who's, entry point into rap music or hip hop culture is later, that you'll feel left out of it. I think it really ties in the ways in which these artists' resonance still goes on. I've been blessed to have introductions from both of my parents, and other people whose opinions and voice in my journey has been important to me. And I think that's going to be a really I've been excited about the ways in which that's going to show up in each episode. Talking about artists like Rhapsody, Glorilla, Kendrick Lamar, Tupac, DMX, The Clips, and others. Just I feel really blessed to be able to have this conversation in public with
Yeah.
hopes that it allows people to really understand not only the prophetic nature of these artists, but to truly respect the art form and truly
Mhm.
respect the craft that they're doing, and understand that these things are not just, party music, or not just caricatures of what you think, neighborhoods look like that you've only watched on the news and never actually visited, or only visited through the lens of charity. And
Right.
so I'm really believing that this is going to be something that helps to transform the ways in which we both talk about theology, the way we talk about culture, and the way in which we understand, as someone who an English teacher is always going to be in my bones, right? Like I'm always going to be an English teacher. So it's going to be one of the hats that I wear, and just lifting up these artists as our poets, as the great writers of our time, right? So if someone
Right.
asked me, like, who's one of your favorite poets of all time, I'm always going to say Nas, right? Like,
Mhm.
and being able to, like, to defend that Kendrick Lamar won a Pulitzer. I mean, come on, like, what are
Yeah.
we talking
Yeah.
about? And so
Yeah.
yeah, I just feel very excited and pleased with where the project is, and where it's going. So hopefully we'll just keep it rocking.
Yeah. And I think ultimately, I hope that this does what you said at the beginning, which is to bring people together, to have these conversations, to think in a new and critical way, but also, Shawnee says at Manello. I'm gonna butcher that name.
Yeah, Mona Leo.
Mona Leo. Do you know Mona Leo?
Shawnee gonna have to put me on.
We are learning new things today. See, this is what I want. I want you all to be able to listen to this podcast, to hear voices that you maybe are a little bit familiar with, maybe you're super familiar with, maybe you're going to learn something brand new, maybe you're going to explore a genre that you've never thought of listening before. And my hope is that through Chris's very sultry and comforting voice, that you will be, it's really quite lovely to listen to. I'm just going to say that.
Appreciate you.
But like through this podcast, you'll be able to hear God speaking through it, that you'll be able to hear God speaking through this music, that you will be able to see theology in a way that you maybe have never seen it before, to explore theology and to do it publicly, as Chris talked about. Chris, I'm so excited for you and for the work that you've put into this, the way that you've decided to partner with us at The Outlook, and the way that we can lift up your platform and the work that you're doing. And I think to say that I believe that you are one of the prophetic voices of our generation, and that the writing that you have done should be heard and read and listened to everywhere. And I know that the staff that's in the comments right now would probably agree with that as well. And so I thank you for your time. November 5th, everyone, Apple Music, Spotify, make sure you're paying attention, mark it on your calendar. It's gonna be ready for you to listen to. Chris, thank you for your time. Theology of Hip-Hop, everyone. Make sure you have it on your playlist. Thanks, guys.